In order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood, from my heart I take refuge in the three jewels. In order that all sentient beings attain Buddhahood, from my heart I take refuge in the three jewels. In order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood, from my heart I take refuge in the three jewels. Whatever the virtues of the many fields of knowledge, all are steps in the path of omniscience. May these arise in the clear mirror of intellect. O Manjushri, please accomplish this. Kema! So tonight is the last class of our fourth segment here, going through the Moonbeams of Mahamudra, the Mahamudra moonshine. And it's a cheerful occasion from that point of view. Not many other points of view. And so maybe you brought some refreshments, maybe not. For tonight's celebration, I have some chocolate and I have some mango. I'll pass that around once we get started here. Anyone else bring anything good?
I have some pastel Easter M&M.
All right. So those are regular M&Ms, but the colors are sort of
Pastel color.
Different color. Okay, cool. Anyone else? Anything interesting? Any moonshine? Anyone bring any moonshine? All right, Mary Beth, a glass of moonshine. Is that sake or white wine?
This is Sambuca, and then I got some cheap cognac.
Cheap cognac.
I had to dust it off. It was all covered in dust.
Yeah, it's been a while, huh? Okay, well, cheers, everyone. I have some Hoo chocolate. Who's on second base, right? No, who's on first base? What's on second base? I don't know who's on third base. Okay, so tonight's meant to be a little review. So how do we start at the beginning of the book? Table of contents called Contents. There was an introduction by Elizabeth Callahan that was awesome. And so if anybody joined later than the beginning, I urge you to read the introduction. There's a great biography of the author. And then the outline of the text is that there's part one is common samadhis. Samadhi that's common to all of us. Right? It's just very, very common, very prevalent. And then that part two is uncommon Mahamudra. And the common part has Shamatha Vipassana. As the chapter title really is about samadhi in general. Then Shamatha Vipassana, then removing doubts about things like analytical and stabilizing meditations. Uncommon samadhis is Mahamudra. Begins with a section called Generating Confidence that has some definitions of Mahamudra. And interestingly, in order to begin Mahamudra, we need confidence in the practice, and in particular the lineage as it exists and as it comes down to us. And then we have the preliminaries, setting up the right conditions in our mind stream, body, speech, and mind. Different approaches for Mahamudra, the shortest chapter in the book. And then there's Mahamudra Shamatha and Vipassana, and then the pointing out instructions, pointing out co-emergence or connateness. And then how to sustain that, sustaining Mahamudra, eliminating deviations and strains, so avoiding problems, how do we enhance the practice, and then the 4 yogas in general and in detail, which will be the next segment and last segment. And there's another text in there. Interestingly, if you turn the page, we have a thing called the outlines of texts at the beginning of the book. And so if you forget the chapter titles, which are the stuff that are aligned to the left, introduction, part 1, Kama Samadhis, and chapter 1, Shamatha, forget about those categories, but just look at the structure of the book. First, the reasons it's necessary to meditate on the nature of mind. All phenomena are mind. Starting point with the easiest topic for most of us, that everything is mind, if you don't mind. And then the second one is the ways to cultivate samadhi. And the ways to cultivate samadhi goes all the way through to the end of the book. That's the rest of the book, is the way to cultivate samadhi, right? There you go, your usual Tibetan style outline. There's the reasons it's necessary to meditate in the mind and the way to cultivate samadhi. Then within the way to cultivate, there's the presentation that summarizes the exposition of the comment. We have the comment samadhis, this A. And then on page Roman numeral 12 is the explanation that elaborates upon the way to cultivate uncommon Mahamudra. And is there a C? I don't think so. Oh, I think, let's see. No, that's it. So then, A includes what is samadhi, dispelling of doubts, and then the systematic presentation of shamatha vipassana, common exposition, causes of both of them, and obscurations to both of them, and remedies that remove the obscurations. And on the next page, small b, the ways to cultivate shamatha vipassana, the way to cultivate shamatha, preparation, exposition, the way to practice it, and then two small i's, the way to cultivate vipassana, the general way, the way to generate the view, and then 3, removing doubts about how to sustain meditation. And that ends the common samadhis. And then the uncommon samadhi is on page Roman numeral 12, B. And first is generating confidence, the greatness of the Dharma that is to be practiced, and B, the explanation of the greatness of the individual. And then 2, the preliminaries, and then 3, on the right-hand side, page 13, the actual explanation of the ways to cultivate Mahamudra, the divisions of the meditation process, and the explanation of the meditation process. First, the process of instruction, first in shamatha, which has preparations, posture, the way to focus, the actual objects, and the objects of meditation involving characteristics, and then on the next page, B, shamatha without characteristics, right? And then at the end of that little section, the way to sustain mental stillness and the process of achieving any purpose. Vipassana has the reasons it's necessary, the preparation, the classifications, and the way to cultivate it, determining the essence of mind and its various appearances. is the starting point for Vipassana. Why objectives are achieved by just observing the mind, determining the essence of mind, the root, determining the essence of thoughts, and then finishing up with eliminating misinterpretations about the root, and then distinguishing when Vipassana is actually developed or not, and correlating it with other approaches on page Roman numeral 15. The process of the pointed out instructions, the presentation of what's to be ascertained, the abiding state of mind, and connateness. The actual pointing out of connateness of mind itself, thoughts and appearances, and then eliminating flaws and identifying the point of meditation. Then sustaining, the way to sustain the practice of meditation, the necessity of sustaining it. And then on 17 specifically, the methods. Identifying equipoise and post-meditative attainment, delineating the general ways to sustain it and the methods for sustaining meditative equipoise. Various methods, and summarizing vital points, and then the methods for sustaining post-meditative attainment as opposed to meditative attainment, and the way to mix those two together, equipoise and meditative attainment on page 18. Eliminating deviations and strains and obstructing hindrances, and finally concluding that mind is unborn. At least my mind is. And let's see, breaking through to unborn transparency. Remember the breakthroughs. This is what we went through in this past segment. And then refinement through the conducts on 19 that integrate all experiences into the path. And the next segment will have the 4 yogas, the way realization develops through sustaining meditation, the divisions of that development, how the realizations of the 4 yogas develop, and that includes the way this 4 yogas is presented, and the common presentation, and then on the bottom, the explanation of the divisions of the 4 yogas in detail. Yoga, one-pointedness, freedom from elaborations, one taste, and non-meditation. And then finally, how the bhumis and paths are traversed through those 4 yogas. Okay, so that's a little overview of the land, lay of the land. Let's start on page of the text, page 3. Actually, page 6. All phenomena are taught to be mind. I can't really speak. I never really learned how to speak properly until I was 5 years old, so I didn't develop properly as a child. So I hope you don't make too much fun of me. All phenomena are taught to be mind. Outside of the precious mind, there are no Buddhas or sentient beings on the Vajrapandra. Samputa, every external and internal thing is imagined by mind. Something other than mind does not exist. The Shawara says all phenomena are your own mind. Apart from mind, there's not even an atom of some phenomenon. Everything is mind. So this is the basis for all of meditation practice in this tradition. That everything is mind. Interesting starting point. Not the most traditional one, but let's see on page 9. If you don't meditate upon the true nature of the mind, we may engage with the Buddha's teachings, but no matter how much we may listen to and reflect upon the words of the genuine Dharma, we will only be able to attain a temporary type of result and not the final liberation. Okay. So, common samadhis on page 15, which is the first page of the Shamatha Vipassana chapter. The author lists the main source texts, since no matter which of the various approaches is to be discussed these days, the most well-known divisions are the ones elucidated in sutra-oriented treatises. Since what appears in numerous sutras of the Bhagavan, such as Unraveling the Intent, Sambhina Mochana, the Dharma treatises of Maitreya, which number 5 in total, Asanga's 5 divisions of the Yogacarya Bhumi, his massive compilation that has 5 sections and 17 subparts, and Asanga's compendium of Abhidharma, Ratnakara Shanti's instructions on Prajnaparamita, which summarizes those texts, and Kamala Shila's stages of Madhyamaka meditation trilogy. So, the Unraveling the Intent Sutras in translation, you can read that. The 5 treatises of Maitreya have been translated. The Yogacarya Bhumi, there's only one section of that that's been translated called the Bodhisattva Bhumi. Not a whole lot on meditation in there. So missing a lot of that. His compendium of Abhidharma is translated, and Radhakar Shanti's instructions is not translated, which is greatly frustrating. Kamala stages of Madhyamaka meditation is translated. Okay, so on page 16, a summary of samadhi. In the middle of the page, nevertheless, let's see. We may wonder, how is it that Shamatha Vipassana include the many types of Hinayana Mahayana samadhis, those with objects of meditation and those without, the various ones associated with the mantra approach, those with characteristics and those without characteristics, which is presumably a reference to the completions, to the development stage and the completion stage, and the numerous samadhis of bliss, clarity, and non-conceptuality that are found in the Mahamudra system. Regardless of whether samadhi has an object or not, characteristics or not, when the mind is engaged one-pointedly with a virtuous object of meditation, it is in accord with shamatha. Virtuous is a little bit unusual. I mean, like there's a pebble or a twig. Virtuous is the breath. Virtuous. Interesting little qualifier there. All the virtuous states of prajna. So prajna is intelligence, and I guess there can be non-virtuous intelligence. But all virtuous states of prajna that differentiate the nature of that object, the nature of the object of shamatha, that differentiate it, that understand the nature of that object, are in keeping with vipassana. Similarly, in Mahamudra, all states of mind, high or low, that are concentrated undistractedly on their particular object of meditation are in keeping with shamatha, and differentiation and awareness adds a little bit here for the Mahamudra version of the nature of that object are in keeping with vipassana. Let's see, we have the causes of shamatha and vipassana, 6 of shamatha, 3 of vipassana. Some minor obstacles to both of them. And let's see, remedies for those obstacles. So the obstacles are here are not quite the same as the obstacles to shamatha specifically. These are generally obstacles to meditation, right? But actually, no, it repeats the 5 of shamatha on the bottom of 19. In the Unraveling the Intent Sutra, Sambhina Mochana Maitreya asks the Buddha, among those 5 obscurations, which are obscurations for shamatha and which for vipassana, and which obscure both. So he's referring to a statement that went previously with a Buddha listed 5 obscurations for samadhi. Maitreya, agitation and remorse, obscure shamatha. Sluggishness, doubt, and drowsiness and doubts, obscure vipassana. Pleasure-seeking and malice, obscure both. He describes agitation and remorse, which are the obscurations for shamatha, and then sluggishness, drowsiness, and doubt are the obscurations of vipassana. And then pleasure-seeking and malice are obscurations of both. And within, what is it, within, let's see. At the bottom of 21, other interruptions to shamatha are the 5 distractions explained in Unraveling the Intent. Then on 22, the simple version in the text, the differentiation of middle and extremes by Maitreya. Laziness, forgetting the instructions, dullness and agitation, lack of application, excessive application are the 5 faults. So these are the traditional 5 faults of shamatha.
So could I ask, those are the 5 that we're probably most familiar with as we learned them. Those other sets, are they from, is it just different traditions or different, do those actually have a different name? Like how do these sets of obstacles get named and defined?
Yeah, the other ones are oops, are much more similar to what are called the 5 afflictions.
Are they more like the Theravadan version?
The 5 afflictions in the Theravadan version, yeah. Attachment to sense objects, malice or aggression, and so forth.
And so the ones that we're more familiar with, would those be considered in the Mahayana tradition? I mean, like distinguishing Theravada and Mahayana, or Theravada and Tibetan Buddhism altogether? Like, where is the
Theravada and Mahayana? Like Buddha Gosha goes through the 5 afflictions, and the Buddha in the sutras constantly goes through the 5 afflictions to meditation, and they're basically afflictions to jhana or dhyana, absorption states.
Yeah, I've seen them a lot. I just have never quite been able to classify belonging of those.
And then these 5 appear first in this text by Maitreya, which then sets the ground for the entire Mahayana tradition, which pervades all of Tibetan and pretty much all of East Asian Buddhism as well.
Would they then only be associated with Tibetan as opposed to the earlier Indian?
That's no, they are. This text by Asanga was the foundation of the earlier Indian tradition.
Oh, okay, thanks. Yeah. That's all I was trying to make sure I didn't.
Yeah, but like texts before Asanga, like Nagarjuna, when he talks about meditation, he basically talks about the 5 afflictions.
Got it. Thank you.
So we're pretty familiar with these 5 obstacles, as we call them, to meditation and their remedies. And he goes through those. And then focuses on 27 on the specific explanation of the ways to prevent dullness and agitation. And let's see, just to make sure we're all on the same page, or we're all versed in these, it would be really good if we all were like really up on these antidotes for the obstacles, right? So laziness has the antidote of suppleness. the remedy is. But he doesn't give, later he'll give 8 applications. Here we go on 24, towards the top. The remedies for laziness are 4: faith, motivation, exertion, and suppleness. And he says the first 3 are easy to understand. And then he explains suppleness at length. The remedy for forgetfulness, often called forgetting the object, is mindfulness. The antidote for dullness and agitation is the alertness that recognizes them. The remedy for non-exertion is applied intention, which is different than sometimes we see the remedy for non-application is application, but here we have non-exertion. And the antidote for excessive application is the equanimity of remaining in the natural state. Very good way, nice way of presenting that. Gives nice explanations of mindfulness, alertness, applied attention, and equanimity. Focusing in on 27 on how to ways to prevent dullness and agitation. Goes through the signs of them first and then how to prevent them. And there's a section here on the bottom of 28 that I found interesting. Things characterized by illumination. Concentrate on the quality of illumination coming from the light of a butter lamp, the light of a bonfire, or the orb of the sun. Obviously, this is before Thomas Edison became famous for stealing somebody else's invention of a light bulb. We should focus our mind on those light rays, lighting up and illuminating everything for dullness and agitation. So, beginning to identify the inner illumination of the natural state of our mind, of the nature of our mind. Okay, then page 30, Essences of Shamatha Vipassana, which we pretty much saw already. And then the objects. And the objects on page 32 is a little bit complicated. On top there, the objects of meditation for shamatha are among noble objects, non-conceptual images, and for Vipassana they are among noble objects, conceptual images. So first, a general characterization that shamatha uses non-conceptual images for its object of meditation. What's an example of a non-conceptual image? Mary Beth?
Space?
Space is actually used as an object, but it's not a great, it's a little bit of an odd example. What might be a simpler, more common example? Inez?
Clouds?
Clouds is a little bit easier than space. Cynthia?
Wouldn't it
They
actually,
move.
wouldn't this just actually be anything that you can see or experience?
Any object of the senses is a
Yeah.
non-conceptual object, such as
A pebble or a stone and all those kinds of things, like or
pebble and a stone and
the breath.
the breath. Duh. The breath. That's the object we all hopefully use for meditation. The breath's a non-conceptual object. It's perceived by our senses, right? Our senses are, by definition, non-conceptual perception. And then conceptual images. So the word images is a little bit confusing. That's what caught us. So an image is the reflection of a mental appearance. Since there's no outside objects, I can't say an image is the reflection of an external object, because there are no external objects. So an image is what appears in the mind as the representation of a seemingly external or internal object you could meditate on the inside of your body, depending on what you consider to be outer and inner, right? So an image is just the representation of something in the mind. And non-conceptual images are things like, what's a good example of a conceptual image, of a concept? What's some basic concepts that are popular in Buddhism?
Would an image of the Buddha be?
No, that's
No.
conceptual. What's a conceptual image? What's a common concept in Buddhism?
Or like emptiness?
Emptiness, yeah. What's another one?
But this is okay. Again, I'm confused that image versus object is the same.
Yeah,
Okay. All
basically.
right.
We're using an image as the object. We're taking it as the object.
Okay. So emptiness.
So whatever appears in the mind, we think about something and it's conceptual, right? So we think about, you could think about impermanence. That's sort of a common one, right? You could think about suffering or the self or selflessness or emptiness or time or space or interdependence or, things like that. Love, war, peace, democracy,
No
any of
such
those things.
thing.
Yeah.
No such thing left.
So, and then they quote the Buddha from the Sounding Emotions to support this. And let's see. Where's the... on page, let's see, 34, we have categorizations, the divisions. First, when shamatha is categorized in terms of its nature, there are two types, mundane shamatha and transmundane. So mundane shamatha is the absorption states. Mundane because it doesn't transport us beyond samsara. And samsara is structured. What's the structure of samsara traditionally? Circles around and around.
Realms.
Yeah, realms. Yeah, exactly. There's realms. So there's 6 realms that get summed up into 3 realms, right? Form, the desire, form, and formless. And when we do that, the desire realm includes which of the 6 realms?
Human.
Humans.
Um,
Desire. Humans. What else is in the desire realm?
Animal.
Animals. Yeah.
Jealous gods.
Jealous gods. They're in
Gods.
they are. I think they would be exclusively the desire realm. Thank you. Yeah, there's one more.
Hungry ghosts.
I'm sorry? Hungry ghosts. Yeah, actually there were 2 more. Hungry ghosts
And the
are
hell
the
realm?
desire.
Hell realms.
And the hell realms. Yeah.
Isn't
So
it everything but the gods?
there you go. All of them except the God realm. So the God realms is the only realm that spans the other 2 realms. And they use the same term in English. Rupa Dhatu or Rupa Dhatu. I think when they talk about the 6 realms, they use the term calm. But anyway, it's confusing in English that you have the 6 and the 3. But that's the basic lay of the land, is that the desire realm includes the first 5 of the 6 realms. And then the God realm spans from the desire realm. So there's some desire realm gods into the formless realms, into the form and then the formless realms gods. So mundane shamatha brings one into the form and then formless realms. And supermundane shamatha brings one out of transmundane shamatha ideally is meditation that brings one out of samsara, which is a little bit odd to say because often they say that only vipassana can really sever the roots of samsara. But I guess then there's shamatha on the realizations of vipassana, such as emptiness, which we saw in various places, is that there's shamatha on emptiness and vipassana on skillful means or wisdom. Anyway, when there's categorized by functions, there are three. The shamatha resting at ease in the present life, and the others. So he gives one of them. There's these three goals, like having a better life in this lifetime, having a better life in a future lifetime, and dedicating oneself to others. The first two are like focused on oneself. So three types of shamatha. The most well-known categorization is by means of method, which is the 9 mental states that we're all familiar with and never really talk about because they're so difficult to achieve and seemingly difficult to parse apart. Categories of vipassana is the confusing one. There's 3 types. Vipassana arising from characteristics and the others, so to speak, as taught in the unraveling the intent. That which arises from characteristics, quoting that sutra, that which arises from thorough investigation, and that which arises from discernment, which is then explained as characteristics is that which only brings to mind a conceptual representation for its sphere of samadhi, which is what we just saw a few minutes ago. What is the vipassana that arises from thorough investigation? It is that which brings to mind dharma topics that were not well understood by the prajna that was directed at them, in order that such topics be understood. So, if you're having a hard time understanding selflessness with your prajna outside of meditation, you would then bring the sense of self into your meditation and do a vipassana practice on the sense of self, generally trying to figure out how the sense of self relates to the actual direct experience of the skandhas. And then lastly, the vipassana that arises from discernment is that which brings to mind dharma topics that were well understood by prajna, in order that bodhisattvas may feel bliss through liberation, through further contemplation of those topics. So we understand emptiness conceptually, so then we meditate on emptiness in order to experience it non-conceptually. Then there's 4 types of vipassana, differentiates, etc., which the description gives like 0 help with. Seem to be basically just based on other presentations of this scheme of 4. It's basically first a scheme of 2, which is differentiation and thorough differentiation, and then each of them have 2 grades or levels. There's like the beginning level, complete discernment, and the advanced level is complete analysis. And so differentiation it describes these 2, differentiation and thorough differentiation, which really sound like the beginner and advanced versions of complete discernment and complete analysis, but the terminology is just like confusing. So forget, it's just sort of like there's A and B, and then each of A and B has part 1 and 2. So part A is the main strategy of the Dharma is to break things into parts. Right? That's what Abhidharma is famous for. Breaking down our experience into the Dharmas. First the 5 skandhas, then the 12 ayatanas, and the 18 dhatus, and eventually the 75 or 108 dharmas. Right? Just breaking down the sense of there being oneness, called me, into the component parts. And then analyzing those parts, looking at how they interact, how do they function, what is their nature. And so this scheme of four really focuses entirely on that strategy of dividing things up and then how do they interact, those different parts. And so on the next page, 36, differentiation is conducted with the quantitative aspect of the objects of meditation, meaning, and forget about the other part for the moment, but the quantitative aspects is like the different variety, of phenomena, of dharmas, right? Phenomena of dharmas. And thorough differentiation is conducted with the qualitative aspects. How do they exist? And what is their nature? Are they permanent? Are they impermanent? And so forth. And then here he mentions the objects of meditation for purifying behavior, meditation for expertise, and for purifying mental afflictions. And he'll come back to those in a minute. Let's see, the order of shamatha vipassana at the bottom of the page is pretty standard. It's first shamatha, then vipassana, but it's not exclusive. And then how do we cultivate the unification? Is first we realize that both are necessary in the top of page 39. And then we apply the ways of unifying them. And there's the idea of like alternating them and gradually being able to stabilize vipassana upon the basis of shamatha, because each one of them deteriorates the other one until they're strong. So vipassana deteriorates the stillness of shamatha when we're developing our meditation, because vipassana is an active meditation. So it disturbs the stillness of shamatha, and the stillness of shamatha dampens the acuity of vipassana initially. So it's like a balancing act to gradually bring the two together, right? Anyway, the results of shamatha vipassana are summed up very nicely in a word that has to do with light. Enlightenment. It's a type of breath mint, right? Shamatha. Okay. The way to cultivate shamatha, the preparation, the objects for shamatha. On page 48.
Actually, could I ask a quick question about that last thing about the unifying? And what you were saying is the balancing of it. But are those deteriorating things, is that in some way part of our fixation, that we can't just, have them both going on simultaneously?
It is for shamatha. For shamatha we think we need stillness, right? Until we realize, once you go through the Mahamudra version of shamatha and vipassana, you understand that thoughts don't interrupt anything, right? But, so that's a matter of gaining a greater understanding. But for vipassana, I think it's much more of an energetic thing where the stillness necessarily has this idea of quieting and analysis. If that answers your question.
A little, I guess. So the idea is, though, that for them to coexist is, well, I guess one question would be, in one sense, when you think about the unifying, it's when you've already realized the nature of mind fully, then the sort of need for that distinction sort of just goes away. But this sounds like it's a little bit more. There's a little more mechanics in it.
Yeah, I would think so. Like to get there,
So the idea of being able to sustain vipassana
more than sustain vipassana, like how to
well,
do vipassana
without letting the stillness dampen it, I guess what you're saying is the
or losing the stillness, without losing the stillness, or yes, without. It's. I think it's more like accomplishing, progressing in shamatha without it totally dampening vipassana. Like clearly we develop them in alternation as we go on. We
Right.
cultivate shamatha basically is exclusively on the cushion. Well, not exclusively, but mostly. Ideally in the rest of our life, we make certain repetitive activities into shamatha, right? But Vipassana is very much of like a full-time thing. Ideally, we're looking at our experience, like what's going on. Who's here? Who's on first? What's on second?
I don't know.
Yeah.
On third base.
And so it seems like it's a gradual progression where each one gets refined to the point where it isn't disturbed by the other one in some way or another, either through understanding or through energetically, purifying obscurations, I guess, or purifying agitation, I guess.
Is there any place that actually talks about this in more detail that you can think of offhand?
Yeah, no.
Don't worry if there's not. I just wanted to plant that seed if you ever think of it.
Yeah,
Thanks.
yeah. I'll think about that. It's an interesting one though, because they talk about the unification, and there's very little given on how to unify.
Yeah, yeah, that's why I had some maybe probably have I'm sure we all have some concepts about it or ideas and illusions about how it occurs, but this sounds like there's some more to it. Thank
Yeah.
you.
I used to think Tilopa's 6 precepts were sort of a way of instruction and unification. And
And don't rest.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, those are my favorite, one of my favorite instructions, actually. I've had them on my shrine for like 3 decades or so. But that's interesting.
So then the objects on page 48, without going into this in detail, it's a confusing list because they're not exclusive. They're overlapping. It's almost like not all of them overlap, but some of them include other ones. But basically we can locate our practice on page 49. B5 is the inhalation, exhalation of the breath. It's to watch your breath moving in and out, keep your mind undistracted. And these are for purifying behavior. And he doesn't here, I can't remember if he does it elsewhere, give the aspect of behavior that's being counteracted with these. But
Usually it's discursive thought, right?
exactly. The 5th one is discursive thought. The first one is attachment counteracted through meditation on ugliness. Kindness counteracts aggression. Dependent origination counteracts stupidity. And categories of adoptus is done to counteract pride. This thought that I am the one doing everything. And then inhalation, exhalation is just discursiveness. So there seems to be general agreement that sentient beings are universally discursive since about the year 1000 onward or something, when every text that you find basically focuses on this. So let's continue through shamatha. Goes through the obstacles and antidotes again in detail, and then goes through the 9 stages of shamatha and links those up with the 6 strengths on page 59. So the strengths, I always like this scheme because it's not as many as the six, and it presents a progression that links to the obstacles and the antidote. So on page 59, the strength of hearing produces the first mental state, but it's a description of the experience of having heard from someone else about how to settle the mind. So we hear the instructions, and that gives us like a little glimpse of like, oh, there is possibly a stillness that's achievable. You get like a little tiny taste. Reflection or understanding is a much more sophisticated experience or understanding of the of why we meditate and how we meditate. The posture, the breath, the eyes, the labeling, the technique, understanding the whole technique and what it's doing. And then the third one is the strength of mindfulness that overcomes, of course, non-mindfulness or forgetting the object. And the strength of alertness overcomes agitation and dullness. And then the strength of diligence overcomes non-exertion or non-application. So through diligence, we then apply the antidote of mindfulness and alertness. So diligence is the power of remembering to apply the antidotes of mindfulness and alertness, and then familiarization is the equanimity or equipoise, where we don't have to exert one antidote or another because we've sort of got everything in coordination. And then the four types of attention, which are progression in our ability to stay with the object. The terminology is let's see, attention. For the first two mental states, there's attention that's tightly focused. So attention with effort, like we're trying to connect with the object. Then the next type of attention is every once in a while we succeed in connecting with the object. And the third one is we're actually able to stay with the object a lot of the time. And the fourth state, we're there with the object and it's effortless. We no longer need to force the attention. So then Vipassana on page 63. And the same repetition of the types, the three types. You don't need to repeat those. And then on the next page we have the four stages. And a little bit clearer explanation of the first one is based on the quantitative, and this meaning like the varieties of phenomena in our world, in our experience, and then the second one is the qualitative, and what is their nature. And then the third one is the Vipassana that differentiates both of them by means of characteristics conceptually, and the fourth one is Vipassana that correctly differentiates subtly, meaning barely conceptual, i.e. leading towards a non-conceptual understanding of phenomena and their nature. Here he introduces the six categories. Trungpa calls the six discoveries. Meaning, the investigation of meaning, or words, entities, characteristics, qualities, time, and reasonings. And these are these odd categories that have can have a lot of detailed explanation to them, but time, let's see, meaning is like, what's the difference between words and their meanings? How is meaning generated? Based on customs and traditions and upbringings and so on and so forth. Entities is internal and external for some reason. is this notion of things being internal to us versus external. And I've never really seen a great explanation of that one. Characteristics is this scheme of generally characterized phenomena and specifically characterized phenomena. So there's this way of dividing all phenomena into conceptual phenomena, ideas, conceptual ideas, and then there's phenomena that we believe are non-conceptual, are not based on our understanding of them, but are actually experienced through our senses. And in the world of there being no external object, that category is a little bit fuzzy, but it's basically objects experienced without conceptuality is specifically characterized, and with conceptuality is generally characterized. And that whole scheme is a very important scheme in understanding of emptiness, and how we constantly maintain the experience of and the belief in things as being real. And it has a lot of subtlety to it, and is explored in detail in the schemes of the Madhyamaka tradition. Qualities is that which is conducive to enlightenment and that which is not. Time is the three times, past, present, and future, and reasoning. So, like, some of them are like very basic, like experiential things, like the three times. Like knowing what time it is. Are we in the past? Sort of a silly thing, but and then reasoning has these four types of reasonings that are this traditional list of dependence and nature and function, and then syllogism. And that's creates the scheme for the entire tradition of pramana, or valid cognition, in the Buddhist world. And they're basically like results of Vipassana. Through Vipassana, we understand these aspects of our world, as opposed to types of Vipassana that you would cultivate. You wouldn't really like cultivate the Vipassana of the three times. Right?
So that's why he called them discoveries instead of types.
Yeah,
Does make sense.
the outcome. Yeah. So to say that there's the Vipassana of the six categories is a little bit odd. And then the whole scheme for common Vipassana, similar to Mahamudra Vipassana, is understanding the view. What's the view? The view is the understanding of the nature of reality, right? As empty. It's understanding selflessness of phenomena, of dharmas, and emptiness of phenomena. So the twofold emptiness. So we see on page 67 the general presentation of the ways to meditate on the absence of self. Where is it? Somewhere he gives the two selves. He hasn't done that yet. Let's see. On the bottom of 69, we have the twofold absence of self, of persons, and the self-entity of phenomena. So, before launching into Vipassana of meditation, or Vipassana that supports the third prajna of meditation, we would go through a process of the other two prajnas of hearing and contemplating emptiness, the selflessness of persons and phenomena. In some detail, I'm going through the reasonings for selflessness and the reasonings for emptiness of phenomena, which he does in a pretty cool way. And then we take that view into meditation practice. So on 79, the way to meditate on the view comes back to identifying the correct view. Sort of like once you actually, like first you cultivate the view and then you actually identify it, basically is the meditation. It doesn't really give something different from identifying the view. And then on 80, so on 80, page 81, it's how that view is cultivated in meditation practice. There's not really any instruction on that. Just a lot of nice quotes. And then how it's experienced also in post-meditation. This idea of what is illusion like? And that's like a reference. It's like summed up in Atisha's slogans, the sixth slogan of in post-meditation, be a child of illusion. What does that mean? How do we experience our world as illusion-like because of understanding selflessness of persons and emptiness of phenomena? So then removing some doubts, like how does shamatha vipassana relate to analytical and resting meditation? And let's see, and then a comparison to other systems, analyzing other systems on page 95. That talks a little bit about like the gurus. We have a certain scholar on page 98, i.e. Sakaba. And then establishing our own system in distinction to Sankapa's system. So, that's part one. Part two, Mahamudra, gaining confidence, and gaining confidence in the Dharma of Mahamudra, based on the way it's presented in the Sutras and Tantras, and the fact that it is focused on in the Sutras and Tantras, on page 213, and then gaining confidence through understanding the experience of the lineage figures.
That's 113, right?
Thank you very much. 113. And it goes through how Mahamudra is presented in the sutras and the tantras in general, and then in the Nuttara tantras in particular, and the way uncommon Mahamudra is taught. Okay, so that's generating confidence in Mahamudra. And then on page 135 at the bottom, how Mahamudra is the profound point. So all the sutras and tantras have one point, and that is Mahamudra. And Mahamudra is equivalent to many other terms such as Prajnaparamita, Nirvana, Shunyata, and so forth. And all the sutras and tantras point towards those enlightenment descriptions. And so how does this path of Mahamudra focus on that explanation of the essence of all the sutras and the tantras? All of that is like the first part of generating confidence, and then on 143 we have the greatness of the individuals, the practitioners from India and Tibet, and we're all familiar with the life stories, hopefully, of many of the masters of these traditions. Then the next chapter is the preliminaries. And that includes things like on page 153, impermanence, to overcome laziness, taking refuge, arousing bodhicitta, offering mandalas, and Vajrasattva to cleanse obscurations, and Guru Yoga. So this is packaged these days in what's called the Nindro practices, the entering the door practices. And he goes through each of those in some detail. Interestingly, has a different order for these than what we receive today in Nindro. Is Vajrasattva's comes before mandala. But when you look at the sevenfold offering, if you remember the sevenfold Mahayana offering, by prostrating, offering, confessing, rejoicing, requesting the teaching, requesting to remain, and dedicating the virtue, their offering comes before confessing. And so that's sort of what he's doing. He's repeating that order, which is another demonstration that the Mudra practice is really an expanded version of the sevenfold offering of the Mahayana. There's, let's see, also in this preliminaries, on page bottom of 168, what is to be done prior to the meditation process themselves? Let's see. What is to be known first? Ethical conduct on 169 is essential. Restraining the sense faculties on the bottom is essential. Alert behavior on 170. Moderation of food, bottom of 170. And then 171, exertion and yoga during the first and last periods of the night instead of sleeping. So not sleeping 12 hours a day, but only sleeping traditionally 4 hours a day. Posture on the bottom of the page, and then on the next page, mindfulness, alertness, and the mental orientation for waking up. So we should sleep for a small amount of time in order to strengthen our body. We should set the stage thinking, I will rise early and exert myself in spiritual practices, instead of being lazy and just sleeping. The way to maintain sessions, preparatory and main practice, concluding, how to actually create a session. It's an interesting little section. Have a shrine, comfortable seat, cut the flow of thoughts, have some resolve about, I will not let my mind stray into jumbling up the various meditation objects, taking one thing from the beginning, another from the end. It's not really a concern for most of us because we mostly do the same thing for a session, but for Tibetans, they have lots of little practices that they accumulate and have to do. And then this mention of short sessions and repetition. Mahamudra approaches on 174. How to cultivate Mahamudra. Divisions of the meditative process. There are two approaches to meditate on the definitive meaning, which is what we've discovered through cultivating the view. There's the instantaneous types who have the highest abilities, and if you're one of those, then you wouldn't be in this class, probably. And then there's by cutting through misinterpretation of the view, and then cultivate the methods for resting their mind right within the view. Then there's the gradual types, either intermediate or lesser abilities, begin by investigating the view from within the cultivation of the still mind and the like, and then they familiarize themselves with the view. Among those two, all the great masters were the instantaneous type, and the rest of us are the gradual type. Well, all the great ones and others teach the first approach from the perspective of those of highest abilities, whereas the Dharma treatises of Maitreya, the 5 divisions of the Upachara and so those other texts we mentioned, they present the latter approach from the perspective of those of intermediate abilities on down, which is why those texts are so helpful. Interestingly, when teachers come, they often teach on the texts of Tilopa and Maitripa, these very ultimate, instantaneous texts, just to give you a glimpse of Mahamudra. Most teachers do this, and very few teachers will teach the very long, extended version of how do real people, like us, actually practice this tradition, as opposed to just clicking on it and realizing it instantaneously. Cynthia.
So, yeah, I was wondering about that in a different way, that if all the masters were the instantaneous types, then how would they know how to help the people who aren't? Because
Yeah.
sometimes
Well,
they say
there.
it's actually good if you have difficulty because then you know how to work with it.
Yeah, that's why Tolopa had to beat Naroba so much because he was so unskillful. But yeah, it's an interesting. Presumably, once they achieve realization, then they sort of understand the nuances, the capabilities of
That
beings.
supposedly just comes automatically by that knowledge of everything.
Yeah, yeah, it's part of the knowledge of everything. It's a category in the everything knowledge.
Yeah, because they talk about for kids, that they're actually often turn out more resilient if they've had difficulty in
For
school.
sure, for sure.
Whereas if
But
they
here,
kind of breeze through, they actually then don't, when they do actually start to encounter some kind of obstacle, it's like they don't know what to do.
but here he says he's unlike what I said that these teachers are the instantaneous types. He says they teach from that perspective. So the Ganges Mahamudra and
Oh
things like
yeah,
that.
yeah, no doubt. Well, that's what
Or,
people want to be taught on too. I mean, do they teach on that because they want to, or because that's what we request, right?
well, I think we request it because we've heard about it from them teaching it. So, like early on, like way back, teachers, when Trungpa Rinpoche was first inviting other teachers to come, they would teach on things like that. And it was just like this little glimpse of Mahamudra. And we didn't know anything about like these longer texts and the, different shamatha with an object, shamatha without an object, the different types of the Vipassana contemplations. We thought, Vipassana was just panoramic awareness,
Ah,
flashing on combers of wisdom.
so the long extended text that you're talking about, would that include like the one we're doing here, and
Yes, yeah.
also some of those incredibly, what other would be examples of the,
The Ocean of Definitive Meaning by the Ninth
oh,
Karmapa.
you're talking about specifically the Mahamudra ones.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay, got it. Yeah.
yeah. And then and he lists the sutra ones, Kamala Shila's, the Sanga's texts, and Ratnakar Shanti's texts as being the extended presentations, where they actually tell you how to meditate, where Kamala Shila says, go to the bathroom before you're going to meditate. What a guy. Only they did that in like TV and movies, like the Star Trek, Okay, we're about to leave, everybody. So then, shamatha, Mahamudra shamatha, process of instruction. So the preparations include the physical posture in great detail on the physical posture here as incredibly important as we know. And then the division of objects of shamatha, objects involving characteristics with support and without support. And support seems to turn out to be like a concrete-ish type support, like image of the Buddha, or on the other end of the spectrum, pebbles and twigs. And without support seems to be things like bindus and lights or sounds, or sometimes the breath shows up without characteristics. Sometimes in other texts it's with supports. And then without support, just basically has tightness and looseness. And we'll see that as we get to it. So skipping the actual objects of meditation, and I'll go quickly through this because we've done it recently. So those that use the breath, object of meditation involving characteristics without support, here is those that use the breath and those that don't, counting the breaths, filling with the breath, and those that do not use the breath on 193. It's this description sounds so familiar. When stillness has been achieved, ... Do not do any practice that involves focusing or concentrating the mind on anything Psalm 193, such as an external focal support or the internal comings and goings of the breath. Your mind should have no support at all and not be disturbed by any concepts about attention. Leave your mind in its own state. Do not think about the past, about what you've done before, things that have happened. Don't speculate about the future, what you may do or how. Do not engage in analysis of the present, which is just going to the 6 points of Talopa there. Or what is around you, what appears to be the case. Leave your mind to be free, loose, and unconstrained. So that's without support. With characteristic, but without support. It's hard to figure out, in what sense is this with characteristics? And then without characteristics is the way to pursue Psalm 195, to pursue flawless shamatha. And then identifying that. So the way to pursue it is knowing the vital points of tightening and relaxing, not too tight, not too loose. And then each of them individually. That's on 195. And then on 201 is identifying that flawless samadhi. It gets a little bit into the faults of doing it incorrectly. The last paragraph there, the absence of sharp clarity is the flaw of dullness. The mind not resting one pointedly is the flaw of agitation. So identifying these sort of obstacles in shamatha, samadhi. And it goes on at some length in this section, which seems to be sort of the culmination of shamatha, with the factors of mindfulness and alertness in the next couple of pages, on and on, being really the two main things. And then on 204, the way to sustain mental stillness with these approaches. Dealing with laziness and the flaws of agitation and dullness once again. Sort of repeating the antidotes to the obstacles. 205, if you make the mistake, it says some of us do not generate faith, motivation, and so forth towards samadhi in the beginning, just proceed in our own fashion. And since our mindfulness is weak, distractions dominate our mind. So re-emphasizing the importance of getting those first aspects of shamatha actually genuinely incorporated into our path. The next paragraph is beginners, you should arouse vigorous mindfulness. So he's in this section that's a culmination of shamatha. He's talking about beginners. Then he has a whole section on mindfulness. On the next page, alertness, exertion. So basically goes through once again those antidotes or the powers. Powers 3, 4, 5, and 6, or antidotes 5, 6, 7, and 8. And then the process of achieving mental stillness, and he goes through the 9 stages and repeats the 6 strengths and the 4 types of attention. So it sort of comes back to the common shamatha. And so what makes shamatha, Mahamudra shamatha, uncommon is the whole scheme really of with support and without support, and with characteristics and without characteristics, is really the differentiating aspect. Vipassana is our time is short, so let's cut to the chase. 220. The way to cultivate shamatha, Vipassana, is determining the essence of mind and its various appearances. It has 2 parts, beginning with determining the essence of mind and its various appearances. Are the reasons that objects are achieved by observing just the mind. Why is meditation on just the mind? Do everything. Determining the essence of mind, which is the root, and then the branches of mind, which are thoughts and appearances. And how do we do that? Let's see, we go to page 224, determining the essence, the root, where it's taught, the stages, and so forth. The actual stages on 226. Earlier, during the cultivation of shamatha samadhi, the emphasis was on resting meditation that relies mainly on a non-conceptual samadhi. In this context, to cultivate vipassana, the emptiness is on analytical meditation that examines and analyzes your own mind with discerning prajna. To do this, arouse sharp mental clarity within a shamatha state that is simply mind not being distracted from its object of meditation. At this point, determining the essence of mind itself is similar to determining the lack of a person's in the sutra context. So comparing Mahamudra Vipassana to Sutra Vipassana. The approach involves adopting the essential points for the body and the posture and using the gaze of looking straight ahead with open eyes as opposed to eyes slanting down. So we raise the gaze straight ahead. There's no indication of like how far ahead to look. I think this which is an interesting issue. On the bottom, let your mind rest evenly in a clear yet non-conceptual shamatha samadhi. In that state, your mind should look nakedly at itself, either in its externally oriented aspect or its internally oriented aspect, whichever is easier. So just that way of thinking about the mind is key. It's like such a big thing in Vipassana meditation. Is like, ideally, first we like, what does that mean? Internally oriented and externally oriented aspect of mind. What? It's like, what? What is he talking about? And I think that takes quite some time to figure out what is the internally oriented aspect of mind and what's the external. So just that, distinguishing those two is a Vipassana exercise. And then once you got that, then enhancing that distinction by practicing looking in that way. And then he says, systematically examine and analyze what that mind's shape and color are like, what abode and support it rests on, what its identity, manifestation, that traditional exercise of the different aspects of mind. And as I said, when we went through this, most of us in the West don't believe that the mind has a color and a shape, but we do have a sense of where it is. So analyze that sense of like, oh, it's in like the back of my head. Or maybe you feel like it's in your heart center. Like, where does it feel like my mind is? And how do I come about with that feeling? So looking at that, what's the basis for that? So on the next page, the shape, skipping that, the abode and support. It's sort of like looking for like where my mind abides and testing it by saying, well, if I were to look at my feet, where would it look? Would I be looking down at my feet, or would I be looking up at my feet? I think most of us would say, well, we look down at our feet. And how about if I'm going to meditate on the crown of my head? Would I be looking up or down? So we have this feeling that the mind is located somewhere, which really does not make a whole lot of sense, but that's the sense of self. So identifying that the sense of self has this affiliation with the place and other aspects. Cynthia?
Well, I just was saying the example you're giving, you're talking about looking, but if you just said, if I'm going to think about my feet, I don't have, like the looking, naturally, you come from where your
Thank you.
eyes are.
As I said it, I realized I shouldn't be using the visual sense verb. Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah, because
Much
obviously we do have a tendency to use, eyesight is.
Yeah, but even so, like we're thinking about our feet, and it's like I'm up here thinking about something that's down there.
That makes it, just thinking about
Brings it out more.
makes it more, evident.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Picky.
No, not picky at all. After the insets, examine and analyze your mind from those many points of view. If having heard this and developed some theoretical understanding, you don't examine your mind, you won't gain assurance and reach a final conclusion. And like some people say, we come to this with our intellectual understanding. Oh, the mind doesn't have these aspects, so I don't really need to spend the time. And we miss the whole point by not doing the actual analysis, that even though intellectually we understand the mind doesn't have a place and so forth, we feel that way. We have this innate sense that it's that way. And that really is the essence of the Vipassana practice. And he talks a little bit about light. So in the bottom of 227, which is interesting, supplicate your guru with strong devotion. Then again, when there's clarity, examine and analyze its mode. And when there's emptiness, examine and analyze the mode of emptiness. So identifying the clarity and the quality of the mind. I should go back to the beginning of that paragraph. By examining this way, you become certain that mind does not exist substantially like a specific external or internal thing. And you meditate by resting your mind quietly on its clarity and emptiness. Even though you may have had some previous experiences of resting, you may still lack assurance about the abiding mode. Supplicate your guru. When there's clarity, examine and analyze its mode. When there's emptiness, do the same. You may be unable to state clearly the situation by describing a color, a shape, abode, support, etc., such as it's like this. Nevertheless, you may at this point experience mind not as radiant light, a color or the like, but as reflexively aware, reflexively clear, reflexively meaning of itself, aware and of itself, clear in itself. Or you may experience it as reflexively empty, and which is an odd phrase, but like it's empty of itself, devoid of something that can be identified. Additionally, when mindful awareness is present, you may have a slight sense of something being experienced that is vibrant and crisp. But when your mindful awareness is distracted, that disappears and you feel convinced that you are helplessly ordinary. I love that phrase. Oh God, helplessly. Those are experiences that may occur at this point. At that time, while not identifying mind as being this, rely continuously on mindful awareness that does not stray from being reflexively aware and reflexively clear. Maintain that without a moment's distraction. When you examine and analyze in that way, do so with discerning prajna while remaining in the state of non-distraction. So that's like unifying shamatha vipassana right there. The discerning prajna is the vipassana aspect, and remaining in a state of non-distraction is the shamatha aspect. Once your mindful awareness wanders and ordinary thinking occurs, that is not analysis. So that's the essence of Mahamudra Vipassana right there in those 2 pages. Really, 227 or 226 to 228 was it. And a lot of citation of scriptures. On 233 is the identification of mind as being like space, using that analogy as a support for understanding mind and for a way of experiencing the sort of unexperienceable quality or phenomena called mind. And the rest of it is pretty much about that. Then appearance is shown as mind looking at thoughts and looking at on 238, appearances are shown to be mind. Those who do not understand the suchness of mind mistake thoughts and appearances, which manifest as the expressive power of mind, to exist objectively as things other than mind. So really this I skipped the header on the bottom of 237, which is determining the essence of thought and appearances, mind's expressive power. So first, focusing on the nature of mind, and then focusing on the nature of its expression as thoughts and appearances. And the summary of that, the essence of that, is basically that we feel like thoughts and appearances are different from the awareness quality of mind. And so that type of vipassana, that section of vipassana, or that exercise of vipassana, is all about identifying that illusion first, that we feel like thoughts and appearances are different than the awareness, and then realizing that they're not different and experiencing a non-dual reflexive awareness. So on 240, the way appearances are realized once mind is realized, and then the objects of the stages of meditation. And this also was a very helpful like meditative support. First determining thoughts, next determining appearances, before this determining the essence of mind. And the conclusion on 245 is that thought and appearances are mind itself. And there is one mind, and it doesn't have these divisions. And so on the bottom of 247, cutting through the roots of stillness and movement within mind itself is dispelling this illusion that mind, that's the stillness and movement aspects of mind are different. But in order to do that genuinely, first the process involves identifying those different qualities of mind, which he goes through at some length, of like how shamatha identifies those two experiences. Shamatha, the main outcome of shamatha is identifying stillness and movement, and then vipassana looks at the nature of those, going back to those traditional ways of defining shamatha. Vipassana as being shamatha is cultivating the samadhi on some non-conceptual object, and then vipassana is the analysis, the conceptual understanding or analysis of that object. So shamatha culminates in shamatha without support, which means meditating on the nature of mind and identifying stillness and movement having two types, thoughts and appearances, and then vipassana is analyzing what is the nature of the still mind, which seems to be the root of mind, seems to be separate from thoughts and movements. And then what is the nature of the movements, thoughts and appearances, and then realizing that they're not different. Ultimately, they're not the same and they're not different because they're not real. Right? But that's a later thing. Then he talks about at the very end, so we'll just finish up this section, the 253, the differences between vipassana developing or not. And he's saying, unlike in the sutra system where you have to actually fully accomplish vipassana to say that you practice or have vipassana, he says even if you have a glimpse of vipassana, that's enough to practice vipassana. Then he correlates it with other approaches, compares it with the sutra approach, basically using primarily the Shravaka Bhumi at the bottom of 255. And the Samdi Nirmochana. So that's it. We made it to pointing out, which we did a thorough review of actually at the beginning of segment 4. We did a thorough review of pointing out, which just briefly is pointing out conateness of mind, the indivisible, empty, luminous quality of mind. And the emptiness of mind is the unfindability, unfindable quality of mind. And the luminous quality of mind is its its manifestation as thoughts and appearances. So pointing out is pointing out the nature of those as being indivisible, which was the conclusion of Vipassana that was not fully stated in that Vipassana chapter. So some texts don't have a separate pointing out instruction chapter, some Mahamudra texts, there are many, and they just have like a conclusion to the Vipassana section, which is this realization of the indivisibility of the empty aspect of mind and the luminous or manifest aspect of mind as thoughts and appearances. So the pointing out follows the same framework, the pointing out the nature of mind and then pointing out, and it had this confusing thing of the character, essence, nature, and characteristic, where like essence and nature were sort of interchangeable. And so identifying the essence, nature, and of mind, and then pointing out the conateness of thoughts and appearances. And then this last section was how not to stray, the different types of ways of straying into dull shamatha that turns into an absorption state, and then how to enhance it by bringing all experiences to the path. Illness, death, terrible occurrences that come towards us, obsessions with this and that, and so forth. Comments? Concluding that.
In terms of practice,
Yeah.
I've found this is the best. Like, I could just read this over and over.
Yeah, and those parts that I'd like pointed to in the Vipassana section, I think we feel pretty comfortable practicing shamatha, except this idea of getting, progressively letting go of shamatha with an object and experiencing shamatha without an object, which is basically shamatha on the nature of mind, identifying what is mind's nature. And how do we practice shamatha on the nature of mind? Mind as in like minding or mentation. What does that mean in experience? And then those Vipassana exercises, sections that we just went through, those 2 sets of pages are the best instructions. And the pointing out is mostly, it doesn't have a lot of instructions, mostly quotes. And then it ends, the conclusion, right, was the unborn quality of mind. All this time we've been focused on mind as being like the be-all and the end-all of everything, and then they pull the rug out from under our feet and say mind is unborn, there is no mind. What are you talking about, mind? I thought that was sort of cruel, unnecessary punishment. Just kidding. Any other comments? So next week no class, and then the week after, ideally we'll start with the last section. I have to map it out and see how many classes we need. Ideally to finish before July, right? And if we don't, if we can take 2 weeks off, that's a possibility, but probably just skip 1 week and start up again in April 29th. That gives us 9. That gives us 10 sessions, 10 classes to July 1st, so ending before July 4th. Interdependence Day. Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate your input, your presence, and your smiling faces. And Let's dedicate the merit. By this merit, may all attain omniscience, may it defeat the enemy wrongdoing from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great east, may the lotus garden of the wisdom's wisdom bloom, may the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled, may all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory. Thank you, everyone. Great to see you.
Bye.
Thank you, Derek.
Take care. Have a nice week off.
Yes,
See
you
you
too.
in a
Have a
couple
good
of
week
weeks.
off, everybody.
Take
Bye.
care.
Bye bye.
Thank you.